Yeah, what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to bring in an interview that we had with Tony Patelis. Tony is on Twitter at College Hoop News. One of the guys, we're junkies, we're vagabond basketball guys. We love it. We follow him. He follows us. He has great commentary, has tremendous knowledge on college basketball, seems to be watching all the games all the time. He's got a Periscope that he does, weekly College Hoops Chat, Wednesday 6:30 p.m. and Sunday 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at College Hoop News. Here's Tony Patelis. Give a listen. He's got some great stuff. Boy, we are honored today to have Tony Patelis at College Hoop News on Twitter. I have to tell you, Gus and I have been following you, Tony, for the last few months, and you have an encyclopedia of college hoop knowledge. And it also seems like you're never sleeping because you're commenting on every single game. So, folks, we're honored to have Tony Patelis here at College Hoop News to give us a few moments. How you doing today, Tony?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. We listen. We're hoops junkies. So are you. Same way. Vagabond guys. We watch all the games. So I'd be remiss. I just got to start. What do you think of the big Gonzaga win over St. Mary's? That divided our podcast, and Gus and Gonzaga came out on top.
Yeah, well, I've been on Gonzaga all year. I'm a believer. I think they're an elite Final Four caliber team. Just another big win for them. They're 6-0 against the top 50 this year. They've had a lot of great wins. I feel like Gonzaga never gets the benefit of the doubt because they're in the WCC, and a lot of people knock them for that. But I think they've shown us enough this year. Beating Florida, beating Arizona, Iowa State, St. Mary's twice. That they're the real deal this year, and I think they could definitely find themselves in Phoenix. Yeah,
I totally agree. And what's funny, Tony, is I personally thought, and I think they're great. Gus had predicted them to go to the Final Four beginning of the season. I think they're fantastic. It's just, college hoops is such a great sport. You never know when you're going to get tripped up at like a Texas Tech or something like that. So I pinpointed this St. Mary's game as sort of, they are going to make a mistake at some point, but they haven't. Not only are they winning the games, but they're winning them comfortably across the board. That's what's really impressive to me.
Absolutely. Whatever, if you're in the WCC, the ACC, whatever conference, it's extremely difficult to win night in and night out. I mean, as we know, these days in college basketball, there's so much parity, and it's tough to win on night in and night out. Like New Mexico State in the WAC, they just won 20 in a row. They got tripped up a little bit, but it's really difficult. And I don't care that they're in the WCC. It's impressive to me, whatever conference you do it in.
I totally agree, and that'll segue into my next topic. A lot of people have been criticizing putting the top 16 teams out, like CBS did with the bracket. I, for one, loved it. I thought it created transparency. It got me thinking about a lot of stuff. There's a couple things I want to run by you. The first one is, were you surprised that Gonzaga was the 4 seed behind Baylor on that top line?
No, because generally the committee is very Power 5 bias, in my opinion. So it didn't surprise me very much, honestly.
Yeah, they are. And listen, I've liked Baylor all year. I actually had them preseason go into the Final Four. It's sort of the Syracuse hangover. I liked Motley. I thought Bill Self was going to actually not win his 13th straight Big 12 title. Although last night's game, he was on the precipice, but they pulled it out, or 2 nights ago, rather. But that was fantastic. But the other ones that surprised me is they really do, Tony, give a lot of attention to location. And I know a lot of people I've talked to who are Villanova fans who feel they're in the bracket of death there. They were put in with Louisville, Kentucky, and UCLA. And what the explanation was, which I will say was consistent from Mark Hollis, the Michigan State AD, was they want to see teams near their school, which does create imbalance, doesn't it?
It does, and I feel like it's almost like a home game the first weekend for some of these teams. North Carolina, say they get put in Greensboro or whatnot. It's difficult, and I think if you're a good enough team, you don't need to have a home game against the 16th seed in the first round of the tournament.
Right, and a lot of people I talked to, they felt they got punished. I mean, they're playing UCLA in the fourth, the 1-4 game right there. That's a tough makeup. And I do think with travel, I was surprised because almost the argument that was made was this year, because of the location of the 1 seeds that they had, Villanova would end up at Madison Square Garden because Gonzaga would not choose to go to Madison Square Garden. Kansas would not go to Madison Square Garden, neither would Baylor. So in essence, which I thought was a good point, this year with Villanova, they're getting Madison Square Garden right now no matter what, assuming that everything plays out the way it does.
Yeah, and it seems like every year we have a new argument, with the committee, and so they have an extremely difficult job. I completely understand that. So it's hard to because of all the different teams and all the different locations to put these teams in the right place. So I mean, am I going to complain about it? No. I mean, it's just something we have to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah, it helps because I'm going to try to predict, Gus and I'm going to try to predict where they put people, so at least we got insight into it. Just a couple of the seeds, too, in this preview that I'll run through. What were your thoughts on the 3 seeds? They put Kentucky in there. Personally, I love Kentucky. They're talented. They have the pizzazz, Calipari, the freshman. I don't know if their resume has really earned them that spot. I mean, they lost 3 out of 4. They lost to Tennessee. So I was a little surprised Kentucky was a 3. And I also was surprised that Florida got a 3, because Florida, to me, Tony, has beaten the teams they're supposed to beat, which is an accomplishment. But I had them at a 4. I also had Kentucky at a 4. But what are your thoughts on Kentucky and Florida?
I agree with you. I think Kentucky should be more on that 4-5 line. I think Florida, too, should be more on that 4-5 line as well. I totally agree with you. Kentucky is a team that, they've been struggling lately, but, I really feel, and I don't know, call me crazy, I feel like a lot of years the committee gives certain schools leverage,
totally
bias
true. Yep.
because of coaches. I feel like Michigan State's in that category this year. They're struggling, but, you have the Izzo factor. So
right. Yep.
I think that, Kentucky probably got that bump because of who they are.
No, that's very true. And it's funny, last year, of course, Kentucky finishes with the same record as Texas A&M, then beats them in the conference tournament, and Texas A&M gets a 3, and Kentucky gets the 4 and has to go play Indiana, right? I mean, that's how that worked out, right?
Of course.
Folks, we're talking to Tony Patelis from @CollegeHoopNews. Does a great job. Has a Periscope that he does on Wednesdays at 6:30, Sundays at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. A great mind here for college basketball. Tony, let's look at the top teams. This year has been so exciting for college basketball because at the beginning of the year you heard about Kentucky and you heard about Duke. And I feel as we're heading into the tournament, the big teams are there, but they all have flaws along the way. I mean, Kansas can't even keep a full bench going, but they have, obviously the talent, the coaching, and that factor. But talk about these top teams. I mean, they're strong, but I think they're flawed.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably say right now Gonzaga is the most complete team in the country. When I break down the roster, offense, defense, all that, positioning, all that stuff. But again, that's the great thing about college basketball. There's so much parity these days. And I think it makes for a better game because, when you're top heavy and you got only 4 or 5 teams that you can legitimately win the national title, it makes kind of for a boring tournament. So I think this year it's kind of nice when they have flaws because you just don't know what's going to happen. But when I look at it, I just keep going back to Gonzaga, and I think this is the team that, really has the most complete, roster. You look at Villanova, not a deep team, not a lot of size on the inside. Kansas, as you said, bench issues, depth issues. UCLA, defensive issues.
Sure,
so
yeah.
There's just a lot of different factors that are going into the season.
Totally agree. And Gonzaga I feel like the country's going to be polarized with Gonzaga because a lot of people remember that Southern game from a couple of years ago, which, Tony, my friends and I are just hoping that the day a 16 beats a 1, that we're there to watch it together because it's going to happen, right? But
it will.
It will. Gonzaga was in trouble against Southern. They're going to say they didn't play anyone. But I think that watching them play, the only other team in the country that has the balance and the diversity on offense to score like that is UCLA. I think they can do it in so many different ways. Shemek was great at St. Mary's.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a major factor inside, and they have so much depth up front with Zach Collins and Jonathan Williams, the transfer from Missouri. So, and then you have Nigel Williams-Goss, who in the backcourt is playing like an All-American right now. And then you match him with Josh Perkins, and you match him with Jordan Matthews. It just makes for almost a complete team, and they still don't get the credit they deserve, in my opinion. People just want to keep harping on their past with the shortcomings in the NCAA tournament. You just have to judge teams on a year-to-year basis.
Totally
I feel like some people don't do that.
Totally agree. And one of the shockers so far for me, and it was in that preview as well, is, to me, the Big Ten is still the Big Ten. And I understand that the top teams are down, right? And they're not maybe at the top point that they have been. But at the time, Wisconsin had one loss, and they were leading the Big Ten. And Purdue has looked just as impressive as anyone in that conference, with Swanigan playing like a top pick in the NBA draft, and those guards are getting more and more confidence, like Carson Edwards. Where do you think they're going to fall? I mean, to not see a Big Ten team in the top 16 seeds was crazy to me, but then Wisconsin goes and loses at home to Northwestern without Lindsey. So, what do you think about the Big Ten?
I don't think it's as bad as some people say. I just think they're lacking that elite team. I really do. I still put Wisconsin in that mix, because you have a guy like Bronson Koenig, Nigel Hayes. These guys have played in a lot of big games, and I don't think a team wants to see Wisconsin in their bracket. I really don't. They're a tough team to play. They're dirty. They're kind of slot. They're not a beautiful team to watch, but they get it done. They're 21-4. I mean, and people keep complaining, they haven't played anybody. You try winning games night in and night out in the Big Ten. It's not easy.
No, it's totally true. And as we get closer to the tournament, I'll admit my bias is I'm a small school guy. I love the upsets. So I love hearing about those small schools across the country that maybe have a chance to pull that upset. We had Kermit Davis on the other day from Middle Tennessee State. I mean, that game last year, I said to him, I was 2 minutes into that game, and I was texting my buddies, you got to get to a TV. They just had that, you probably have it too, that feeling where this is going to be one of those games. Who are some of those smaller schools? Is it a Dayton, Middle Tennessee? Who are some of those schools that you feel, maybe SMU even, who's coming on now, that you think can make some noise and are dark horses for the Final Four?
Well, I definitely think that Middle Tennessee State's, again, one of those schools. They have that three-headed monster, Giddy Potts, Ja'Cory Williams, Reggie Upsaw. They have enough production there to beat a big school. They did it last year, as we see. I also like UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington, they've been struggling a little bit down the stretch here. They're still 11-3 in conference, 22-5 overall. Earlier in the season, we were talking about maybe even that large bid, but they came up short against some of their Power 5 schools in the non-conference, but they're a school you got to keep an eye on. Also, a team like Akron is really playing well right now. Isaiah Johnson is a heck of a player. They got like 6-7 guys averaging between 16 points and 7 points. So that's a team to keep your eye on. Also, Belmont. Belmont lost their first conference game. They're 12-1. Evan Brads is one of the best big men in the country. Sure. He's averaging 21-9. So they're another team I think you got to take a look at as well.
No doubt. And you never know when a team like a Lehigh, remember that one year, the 215 season, was it Norfolk State and Lehigh, I think, are going to pop up. Folks, I'm going to let Tony go here in a little bit, but I'm going to put you on the spot, my friend. So I want to hear from you, expert, loves college basketball. If these 16 seeds, and I'll go region by region, were coming out tomorrow, and of course you and I are going to root for the underdogs, but let's just hypothetically say a miracle happens and the Sweet 16 is these 16 teams. I'm just curious who right now, if the games are tomorrow, who you would like. I'll go through it, okay? Just give me your picks. Sure. So East bracket, we got Villanova versus UCLA and Kentucky versus Louisville. How do you see that one shaking out?
Oh boy, I would probably go with Louisville and you said UCLA and who?
Villanova,
but I can't go against Villanova in that one. I got to go with Villanova and Louisville.
So Villanova plays Louisville. Who do you think can make the Final Four?
I got to go with Nova.
Fair enough. Okay, very good. Going across the other side, Kansas plays Duke and Florida State plays Arizona.
Going with Kansas in that matchup with Duke, and I would definitely go with Arizona in that matchup with Florida State.
Yeah, so so Kansas versus Arizona, and who's coming out of that one?
Oh boy, I got to go with Arizona. I'm big on the Wildcats.
I would have said the same thing. I totally agree with you. Going down, we got Baylor versus Butler, a 1-4 game, Baylor versus Butler, and we have North Carolina versus Florida.
Got to go with Baylor in that matchup with Butler, and especially with John Igbugnu out with the torn ACL, I got to go with UNC.
Very good. And then UNC plays Baylor?
UNC. I'm a big Tar Heel guy. I think people are kind of sleeping on them a little bit down the stretch here. Totally
agree. At our last bracket, Gonzaga plays West Virginia. And then Oregon, right? Especially because West Virginia can't beat any of the Oklahoma schools at home, but they can beat anybody else, and they should have won in Fog Allen. So Gonzaga, West Virginia, and Oregon, Virginia.
Okay, I think Gonzaga will eke that out against West Virginia, and I'm going to go with Oregon over Virginia.
Giving us we call it West Coast love. Giving us a Gonzaga, Oregon Elite Eight. Who do you got?
Got to go with the Zags. I think it's their year. I think it might happen this year for them.
Well, you heard it there. Tony Patelis has Nova, Gonzaga, Arizona, and UNC. That, my friend, would be a great, great Final Four.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tony, for a few minutes here. Guys, you got to check him out on Twitter, at College Hoops News. He has a weekly Periscope, Wednesday 6:30, Sunday 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. All things college basketball. We love following you, Tony. You have some great things out there. And so thank you so much for a few minutes. We're honored to have you here, and we'll look forward to March.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Yep.